Tooth arcs are covered with HS separating silicone. The occlusal surfaces and the cutting edges of the teeth are not covered. This is the only way to unmistakably determine the position of the teeth with relation to the occlusal surface. The adhesive crystals added to the separating silicone serve as retention with countering the flask. In order to allow a problem-free separation of the flask halves, stone prep for isolation purposes, plaster against plaster. After the contact surface of the lower flask half has been cleaned thoroughly, the upper half is mounted and the two halves are screwed together tightly. The closed Unipress flask is now fitted with investment plaster. After that, the position of the model is positively fixed in the lower flask half and that of the occlusion in the upper. Subsequently, the Unipress flask is a wax boil-out unit. As a consequence, the model wax can be easily removed after the flask has been opened. Residual wax is removed by boiling out the opened flask in the ceramatic. This also warms up both metal flasks and the plastic. The now hot flask halves are isolated with Alginate Plus, plaster against resin. While the flask halves are allowed to cool off slowly, the acrylic teeth are furnished with the necessary mechanical retentions. Important, the stability of the connection between the acrylic teeth and the resin of the denture depends on the quality of the mechanical retentions. After the teeth have been prepared, they are set back carefully into the upper flask half. This is facilitated by the layer of separated earlier. The flask halves are closed again and are locked. In order to reduce polymerization shrinkage, the use of the special injection resin Futura Jet allows for a considerable monomer content in comparison to other self-curing. While the resin dough is allowed to swell, the cylinder is prepared. First, the Vaselined injection piston is positioned into the lower part of the cylinder. Subsequently, the slotted foil disc is put on an uncontrolled injection of the resin into the flask. The thoroughly mixed resin dough is now placed into the cylinder. The consistency of the dough is checked with the help of an especially designed instrument. Important, the injection piston is mounted with the larger opening downward. This takes place only after the resin in the cylinder is no longer stringy. The Futura Jet allows ample time for the following working steps. The locking bolt is now mounted onto the conical guide of the flask in flow position. The divesting device into a vertical position and the flask is mounted. When injecting the resin, the flask interior should have a temperature of approximately 40 to 43 degrees centigrade. After the cylinder has been positioned on the flask, cup and mandrel are mounted onto the cylinder. Now the resin is injected into the flask until material begins to emerge at the locking bolt. Subsequently, the position of the locking bolt is turned from flow by continuing to turn the mandrel pressed in the flask. Unipress injection method illustrated in sectional view. After the actual injection is finished, the continued turning of the mandrel effects a compression of the resin, and at the same time, the integrated cup spring system is put under tension. The continuous feeding of the resin by means of the pressure springs or the polymerization shrinkage within the flask. After a curing time of 20 minutes, during which additional energy supply is not necessary, cup and cylinder are removed first. Subsequently, all the screws and the conical locking bolt are removed. After the Unipress divesting unit has been tilted back, the flask halves are separated by tapping the divesting unit with a hammer. Now, the plaster body is opened. Already at this stage, the extremely smooth and homogeneous base surface of the denture can be seen. Both the pressure and the injection piston are removed from the cylinder together with the cup. This is done in the Unipress divesting unit. After divesting has been completely finished, the re-occludable models are put back into the articulator together with the resin parts of the denture which have not yet been finished. In order to check the correct dimension of the occlusion, a micrometer gauge is again used. The result is fully convincing, pleasing the dental technician and above all, the patient. Today's high demands for precise fitting dentures with the Unipress system. Schutz Dental, your professional partner in the entire field of dental technology.